episode for today. I want to welcome you all. My name is Jeannie Alter. I'm the Executive Director of the American School Health Association, and I'm so pleased to welcome you here for this wonderful webinar and also to let you know about a partnership that we have with the American Academy of Pediatrics. So it is a very exciting day. We are offering an e-learning course of, oh, that's not so good. You can't see it so well. Let me unblur silly technology. My one-of-a-kind body. We have an e-learning course that we are launching. This is available to anyone, but our ASHA members will get a discount on the book, a 20% discount on this book, as well as free continuing education units through NCHEC. So I'm really excited that we have been able to partner with AAP on this. And we hope that you all will take advantage of that, particularly as you're thinking about maybe your renewal period with your CHES or MCHES. It's a great opportunity to get some of those hours in. And for those of you who are already ASHA members, we thank you for being a member and for being a part of the ASHA family. And if you are not an ASHA member, just remember that there are some great benefits, including things like discounts on books like this and continuing education for e-learning courses, webinars, and our conference, which is coming up in October in the Indianapolis area. So we hope to see you all there. I want to take this opportunity to invite our partner from AAP, Elise Goldstein, to say a couple of words and introduce our speaker.
Okay, thank you, Jeannie, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm so pleased to introduce to you Dr. Whitney Casares, who is a board-certified pediatrician, a maternal child health expert, and author, and the founder of Modern Mommy Doc and Raising Body Confident Kids. Through her clinical expertise and lived experience as a mom, she helps families raise emotionally and physically healthy kids without falling into the traps of perfectionism or pressure. Her most recent book, My One-of-a-Kind Body, gives children a science-backed, empowering introduction to how their bodies work and why every body is worthy of care and respect. Dr. Whitney is also the author of the New Baby Blueprint and the Working Mom Blueprint. She is a nationally recognized voice on pediatric health. Dr. Casares, her expertise spans the public health, direct patient care, and media worlds. Her work has been featured in outlets such as the New York Times, Forbes, and Fortune. She holds a master's in public health in maternal and child health from the University of California, a journalism degree from California Polytechnic State University, and a doctorate in medicine from the University of Vermont. She lives in Portland, Oregon with her husband and two daughters. The American Academy of Pediatrics is the largest global publisher of resources that support children. We are proud to partner today with ASHA and offer your members a discount on copies purchased of My One-of-a-Kind Body. If you're interested in a bulk purchase for your school or your organization, please contact us at nationalaccounts@aap.org. I know you will learn a lot this afternoon during our conversation with Dr. Casares. Thanks for joining today's webinar.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Elise. Thank you guys so much for being here today. We're going to keep it very casual. I am a pediatrician. I do have all the things behind my name and the credentials and whatnot, but More than anything, I think that what I'm known as the modern mommy doc is kind of the friend who happens to be a pediatrician. And so that's absolutely the vibe that I try to bring to all my presentations. This is very interactive. So if you have thoughts you want to put into the chat as we go along, there's going to be a few places where I ask you to enter things into the chat. But if you just have a thought that you want to share with the rest of the group, I know that we would all benefit as we go along. Okay. So please don't feel like that's intrusive at all. So today we're going to talk about unlearning diet culture, a guide for educators and student health professionals. And the reason that we are going to start here, let's see if it'll let me advance. There we go. Okay. The reason that we're going to start here is because we could talk about what we want to do with kids, with the students that we see, with the patients that I see in clinical practice. But we always have to start with ourselves first when it comes to the way that we interact about bodies and about diet culture, because so much of the way that we speak and the way that we think about bodies is ingrained in ways that are even subconscious. So we're going to talk about how diet culture messaging from the 80s to the 2000s lives in your classroom today and in your brain. We're going to identify some specific language lessons and habits that may unintentionally harm student body image, and then understand the science behind body image, food relationships, and movement for young people. Okay, so I'm Dr. Whitney. You got the formal bio, but most importantly, I'm a mama too. And probably most importantly, one of those kids is, well, two of those kids are neurodivergent. One kid has autism, the other has ADHD. That's important because my lived experience is that my kids don't always follow the book. Even the things that I write, my kids question me and say, like, well, what the heck? That doesn't work in our home. So I'm always about kind of bringing everything to reality and what works. I do have that maternal and child public health expert background, and that just means that I understand kind of how things work on a systems level, as opposed to just decisions that an individual makes, and also that I understand really clearly that differentiation between a mom's needs, a kid's needs, a mom's needs, a kid's health, and then how those two things intersect. I host a podcast called the Modern Mommy Doc Podcast, and then I have a couple books that I have here. The one called Raising Body Confident Kids is coming out in September. That one is for parents. And then my One of a Kind Body is the one we're talking about primarily today. And this one came out just this last year, published with the American Academy of Pediatrics. Okay, so we'll talk about how we were marinated in diet culture, how it shows up in school, the science that we know that kind of is anti the way that it shows up and what we were marinated in, shifting our practice, and then give ourselves some time for some reflection and commitments. So we really need to understand how it was that we were talked to in our homes, on the television, and with our friend groups from our parents about our bodies. And so I want you, if you feel comfortable, if your camera's off, or you don't have to close your eyes, but just at least think about it in your brain. Think about your 10-year-old self, your 12-year-old self, 15 years, maybe even 8 years old, like I was when I first started thinking about my body. Think about what you heard adults say about their own bodies, what messages, magazines, TVs, or movies said about the ideal body. Think about if you were ever praised for losing weight or made to feel ashamed of your size. And then also think about PE class or health class and what it taught you about food and bodies. You are welcome to share a memory that stands out. While you think about that, I know this is a personal thing, so if you don't want to share, that's okay too. I'm going to share my own personal story. I remember being about 8 years old when my mom first said that she was fat and to not look at her own body. My mom is one of my favorite people on the planet. She's an amazing mom, but she was just shaped by the culture that she lived in, right? We had Slim Fast in the refrigerator. We had pictures of rail thin models pasted to the outside of the refrigerator to remind her that this was the body ideal that she should follow. And I remember she was getting out of the shower and she wrapped herself in a towel and said, like, don't look at this fat body. It's gross. And my mom was not like an obese person. My mom did have a mom bod, of course, right? She had birthed two kids. She had a little bit of roll and some cellulite and all those normal things. But that stuck in my brain, along with all the other things that I saw in kind of the environmental milieu that I was living in. I remember that I did Buns of Steel workouts starting at about 12 years old. I remember doing Taibo videos. I remember reading Shape magazine and kind of wondering why my body didn't match what I was seeing in those magazines. So remember, we didn't choose all these messages that we saw. I know that I didn't choose the messages that I heard from my mom or from other people. In the 80s, Jane Fonda workout tapes, they sold 17 million copies. So that's when things really started to ramp up. That buns of steel in every living room, the low-fat diet craze, and then this idea that thin equals disciplined and fat equals lazy. This was the era of Slim Fast, Jenny Craig, Weight Watchers, all of that kind of came to pass. And Weight Watchers, even the founder, had a whole phrase and a quote that was about kind of like morality and that like nothing tastes as good as skinny feels. People probably remember that from the 1990s. There were all these fat-free foods that were packed with sugar. Oprah dragged 67 pounds of fat on television to show people what that looked like. And then in the 2000s, we had America's Next Top Model with Tyra Banks, Atkins, South Beach, keto, reality TV body shaming, like The Biggest Loser, Abercrombie, and then this idea of kind of clean eating, which has followed us into the 2010s and 2020s, this idea of like wellness as another version of diet culture. And not all wellness trends are bad, but a lot of that still has to do with how do I achieve this perfect body or this good body. So, diet culture taught us that good bodies are thin, tone, discipline. Bad bodies are soft, large, or average. That some foods are very virtuous and some foods are complete failures. And most importantly, that what you eat reflects your character. Very, very importantly, they taught us that weight is the result of willpower. So if you're heavy, you're not trying hard enough. If you have lost weight or you are thin, it's because you have tried hard and you better keep on trying hard to maintain what you have. Um, there's a ton of information and messaging around worth, that your body size determines how much respect, attention, and opportunity that you deserve. I'm sure that people can remember these pictures. When I put these on my Instagram, people were like, don't hate on the kudos. Those were actually like really good. And I agree. Kudos were amazing, but I will say like Snackwell's cookies, they were not good, but I definitely like stuffed those in my mouth. Special K cereal diets, America's Next Top Model. Again, if those of you have seen like the documentary about America's Next Top Model that just came out recently, very interesting and telling about kind of how that was built. And then Jessica Simpson, we can probably all remember that, this picture of her gaining weight and being told this is like how the picture of how disgusting a person could look, like the most disgusting person. And really, she's kind of a mid-sized person here. Looks like she just has a mom bod. I love this quote from Rachel Brook. She's a body confidence expert. She says, nobody profits off of us being confident. Everybody profits off of us being insecure. And that is entirely true about the beauty industry and about the diet culture industry. So, diet culture, like I said, it doesn't just get transmitted through these ads or through these television programs. And it isn't just one big moment. Although I have this memory in my own head, that's not the only moment, of course, that occurred in my family. It's 1,000 small ones over decades. So, it's mom stepping on the scale. It's people saying you'd be so pretty if you lost a little weight. Health class BMI weigh-ins in front of peers, dieting at the dinner table, PE class emphasizing weight control, praising a kid for slimming down, and then in doctors' offices, this idea of have you considered losing weight? And again, I want to be vulnerable about my missteps over time and medicine's missteps. Part of the reason that I wrote My One of a Kind Body is that I know that when I first got into medicine, that I was still entrenched in diet culture. Medicine absolutely has been historically all about BMI and size tied to health, as opposed to considering more of a big picture. And I remember there was one kiddo that came in. She was probably about 12 years old. We'll call her Layla. That's not her real name. And she came in, and I wrote an entire plan for her for how she could lose weight and how she could move out of the obesity category in front of her mom. I thought I was using like motivational interviewing to get her going. And I remember her mom pulling me out of the exam room after I talked to her, pulling me aside in the hallway and saying, like, basically, how dare you talk to my daughter in this way? Like, she already feels bad about her body, and now she's going to feel even worse leaving this exam and leaving this doctor's visit. I was probably 2 years into private practice or 1 year into private practice at that time. At this point now, I've been doing medicines. Let's see, I graduated in 2011, so for about 15 years. So this was very, very early on in my career. I thought that I was like, hot stuff coming out of Stanford residency and that I knew, and I had all this ivory tower learning. And I remember that mom looking at me and saying, one day when you have kids, you'll understand. You'll get it when you finally have kids. And the day that I had kids, I did understand. And the more that I learned about this diet culture and what it's based off of, this idea of us being worthy if we only act a certain way, do certain things, look a certain way, the more that I realized that I was part of the problem. So I've definitely changed my practice. Part of the work that I do is helping other pediatricians to change their practices in terms of how they weigh people and the conversations they have. But that's also part of the reason that I'm here is because you guys are a huge part of this conversation too. So we're sold this myth about having more discipline, eating less, moving more, and that it's really simple when the science actually shows that it's much more complicated. So the science actually shows it's not all about willpower, that BMI, it doesn't necessarily equal health, that weight loss doesn't necessarily mean that you've gained health, and that then people aren't necessarily healthier. Now, I want to make a caveat that, of course, I'm a medical person. I do believe that at extremes, that it can be really unhealthy for someone who has a significant amount of weight loss or weight gain in a short period of time, that can be incredibly unhealthy. Um, and also, the science shows us that it's a constellation of other factors that determine a person's overall health. So, the most important message that I want you to take away from this is not like, should we use BMI or not? It's a very imperfect measurement. BMI, for those who don't know, is body mass index. It's your height and your weight kind of in combination. And it's based absolutely on old data from white men. Surprise, surprise. And so it's not a good measurement of muscle mass. It doesn't take into consideration different ethnicities, but it is the tool that we have at our disposal at this point as health professionals. And for those of you who are in health offices or PE teachers, it's not going to be something that we completely probably go away from. But the most important message is just that it's not the only definition of health and that it has to be used as one vital sign in combination with other factors and other data points that we're looking at for health. Okay, so you heard how it shows up in our homes, you heard how it shows up in the medical office, but how does it show up in school settings, which is where you guys live? So, one thing that I'd love you to do is to think about, and you can say yes, just say yes in the comments, or you could just think to yourself if you want to. Think through if you've ever said or done one of these things. So, if you've ever, and I will be the first to raise my hand to say I have 100% done several of these things earlier on in my career. So if you've ever praised a student for looking thinner or taking care of themselves, labeled foods junk, bad, or unhealthy in lessons or conversation, used calorie counts or BMI as health metrics in class, celebrated weight loss as an achievement, ignored or laughed off a weight-based joke between students, framed exercise as burning off food or as punishment, weighed students or discussed their BMI in front of others, and posted motivational content about body change or getting fit. If you said no, amazing. That means you're part of the solution. But if we look back just 20 years ago, even 10 years ago, this was really common practice. And so if this isn't you, you haven't said any of these things, amazing. Even if you haven't, though, most likely there maintains or there remains a bias inside of yourself. And that's borne out in the literature because we know that diet culture is still present in classrooms and that students absolutely carry the cost of diet culture. So, still today, 1 in 5 elementary students experience bullying, and body-based teasing is among the most common. So, that means that it's not getting completely wiped out by our efforts as much as we try. 50% of young people have reported being mocked for their body size before finishing school. So half, that's like half of us sitting in this room. 40% of postpartum women have experienced depressive symptoms leading to body dissatisfaction. And that cycle they report in all the studies starts in childhood. And this idea of like bounce back culture and that they're not kind of the same childlike body that they were. And then the last stat that I want to bring to you is just that 11 is the average age when kids begin internalizing diet culture messaging and body shame. A lot of evidence coming out that it's starting even sooner now. And the thing that's important to remember is that weight stigma, it creates this really vicious cycle, and diet culture creates this really vicious cycle. So if there is a child who is overweight or just who has comments made about their body, if there's weigh-ins, if there's lots of body focused messaging, we know that leads to shame, anxiety, and avoidance of movement. We know that that leads to lasting negative relationships with exercise and health. That also leads to reduced participation, skipping PE, school absenteeism. There's also separate data on comments or messages about foods being bad or about weight loss initiatives for kids, that tends to backfire for kids, and that a lot of kids who have had weight loss interventions that have not been done in a way that's really intentional and that's evidence-based early on, that they end up gaining a lot of that weight back. So that's kind of how things go awry in school, but there's also some science about what should we do and what are the ways that educators like them, like yourselves, can really make a difference for kids. So, what we're understanding is really changing. So, I told you earlier, right in the very beginning, that diet culture basically says, hey, calories in, calories out. All you need to do is eat less and exercise more, and then you will have a body that's quote unquote ideal. And what the science is showing us is that body weight is actually really complex biology. If any of you are moms here, you know that you've had tons of sleep deprivation. A lot of us have stress, even if you're not a mom. And there's tons of evidence showing that sleep deprivation is one of the number one issues that's linked to reduced metabolism. So that in studies where people were trying to lose weight, that if one group had significantly less sleep than the other, then that group had significantly more difficulty losing weight than the group that actually got an adequate amount of sleep. So things like genetics, sleep, stress, hormones, your environment, and then of course access to nutritious food, those all determine body weight. And willpower and calorie math are just a really tiny piece of a really big picture. Like we said before, BMI has serious flaws. So even the way that we are measuring if someone is healthy, quote unquote, or not is not accurate. So BMI developed in the 1800s, not based to develop individual health and ignoring a lot of really important factors. We know that weight stigma causes real harm, that it's linked to elevated inflammation, higher rates of depression and anxiety, disordered eating, and avoidance of medical care. So it actually makes health outcomes worse, not better. And that health behaviors predict outcomes better than weight. So sleep quality, stress management, movement, nutrition quality, those are far better predictors of long-term health than any number on any scale. We also have learned a ton in the science that we are in less control than we think we are. And this is a very human thing to think that we can control everything. But just like the weather and just like any natural disaster, sure, we play a small role, but lots of different pieces that play into it. I want to just highlight food insecurity, mental health, and finances because those are often underlooked. A lot of kids who don't have reliable access to nutritious food, they can't make quote unquote better food choices. Right? Hunger also affects focus, energy, and our behavior. If we're constantly hungry, we're way more likely to overeat. Of course, we know that mental health issues like anxiety, depression, ADHD, trauma, those all affect our sleep activity level and our body weight in really interconnected, complex ways. And then, of course, finances of families. The other concept that I just want to bring up for kids, but then also for ourselves, is this idea of food noise. So a lot of our students, especially if they have had food insecurity or if they have had diet culture that's been talked about in their homes, might have increased risk of food noise. Food noise is that constant mental chatter about what to eat, what to avoid, and kind of how to compensate for it. And it's this idea of even when you're not eating, you're thinking about food, and you're not just thinking about how much you want to eat or what you want to eat, you're also thinking about what you've already eaten. And so it's kind of clouding your cognitive bubble all the time and making it so that it crowds out other things that you could be thinking about. And a ton of information that's coming out in science about how food noise actually drives kids to eat more and also drives chronic stress, which will cause metabolism to be affected. Okay, so first I'm going to go through what kids actually need around food and then what kids actually need around movement. This is from Ellen Satter, who devised this strategy called the division of responsibility. And she talks about adults deciding what food is offered, when meals happen, and where eating takes place, and then kids deciding what of the food and how much of it that they're going to eat. The basic principles of this strategy are about teaching food literacy, avoiding moralizing food, never restricting publicly food, and then emotional hunger being really real. So identifying that students who eat for comfort aren't weak, but that they do need help identifying when they are eating for emotional reasons versus physical reasons, and that it's not a discipline issue, but it's more of a life skill issue to teach kids this. So a lot of the division of responsibility is about taking pressure off of eating. It's also about giving kids the power to be able to decide how much of something that they want to have and to eventually become intuitive eaters. Probably lots of you have heard the term intuitive eating is something that was developed to address eating disorder patients. So it's used a lot in eating disorder patients where patients basically can kind of like eat however much they want and eat based off how they feel. Kids, I would say, have a harder time doing that, especially like my ADHD kid has a harder time doing that. If left to her own devices, she would eat like all Oreos all day long. And so there has to be some type of balance. And so Ellen Satter's division of responsibility teaches kids that there is some structure still, but it teaches them to listen to themselves so that eventually they can become intuitive eaters and they can listen to themselves as they're eating. For movement, the difference that we want to teach for our kids as opposed to prior generations is instead of movement as punishment, movement as care. So instead of assigning running laps as a consequence for misbehavior, connecting movement to how the body feels. Framing PE, instead of framing it as burning off calories from lunch, talking about celebrating what bodies can do and not how they look. Avoiding this no pain, no gain in classroom motivation on a variety of levels, but especially when it comes to movement. Not praising kids who push through pain or injury. Thank goodness we've had people like Simone Biles who have recently been in the news talking about this, and the recent figure skater who won the Olympics, right? Like, I think we're having more and more people who are demonstrating this, which is awesome, but we play a role too in the classroom and then also in schools. Not doing body composition testing in front of peers, and then, of course, not awarding any trophies for either like if people have had huge body changes or if they are the person who has pushed the hardest. And really focusing on fun, connections, and how kids feel. That does not mean that as PE teachers or some of your PE teachers or as health educators, that we can never encourage a child to challenge themselves, that they can never do PE that makes them sweat, that's difficult for them to do. It's just about after the fact, do they look forward to going and doing that again later? So, for example, I was a runner in high school. Of course, no one wants to run in like a 3 mile race, doesn't feel good at the end of it, but man, you got kind of those good endorphins going. And I still love running as part of just what I do in general for anxiety care and for life care. So it's all about kind of how that person looks forward to that movement later. The other thing that you can help in your classrooms with is moving kind of beyond this idea of body positivity to body neutrality. So, whereas diet culture is a lot about body shame, I hate my body, I need to fix it to be worthy. Body positivity says, I love every inch of my body always. It's really well intentioned, but it can feel like another impossible standard for kids. And it creates kind of this toxic positivity that can silence real struggles. So instead of kids being able to talk about their emotions, talk about how they actually feel in their body, about their pimples, about their, hair that maybe looks different than somebody else's, about maybe like stretch marks that they have on their body, body positivity really shuts that down and says you should never talk about that stuff because you're beautiful anyways, like you're always good. Body neutrality instead says my body doesn't have to be perfect, just loved. It needs to be respected. That's all it needs to do. it's not the most important part of who I am, but it is a part of me who that has to be taken care of well. So body neutrality is a lot better for kids. Part of body neutrality is one of my favorite concepts in medicine, which is called self-compassion. If you've heard of self-compassion, just drop a little thing in the chat, like a thumbs up or hands up. I'll just explain it quickly. Self-compassion is this idea that all of us are humans. We all have emotions. We all make mistakes. But that if we're kind of in our emotions and making decisions or continuing on in terms of our thought process, we're going to get stuck. Instead, what we need to do is kind of take a pause, just like we would with little kids who are having like a really hard time, like a tantrum. Give ourselves some grace. Remember that other people are having the exact same experience that we are. And then our body's able to relax, our nervous system is able to decide that it's calm, and then we're able to kind of move through. So this would look like if a kid said, gosh, like I hate my acne. It looks so terrible. I feel so embarrassed about my acne. The first step in self-compassion would be to say, okay, what am I feeling? I'm feeling embarrassed about the state of my skin. The second step would be to say, why do I feel that way? I feel that way because I don't look like everybody else, or I feel like people are maybe looking at me. Then the next step is that kind of common humanity piece. I bet there's a bunch of other kids in my class that would feel exactly the same way. Now the brain, now the mind, now the body has had the chance to say, okay, I'm not in a threat state. I'm okay. And then it can actually like move through the emotion and decide what I'm going to do. And that might be for a kid, I'm going to use cover up. That might be for a kid, I'm just going to decide, you know what, if I show my acne, that means other people can show their acne. That means that I'm going to go talk to someone about it a little bit more. It just gives a kid that pause to be able to then have a conversation about it in a way that feels more logical and regulated, as opposed to just fear-based or embarrassment-based. The other thing that we can do in the classroom is bust these myths that we were taught. So we talked about these myths on the left-hand side earlier. And so we want to move more toward the reality for our students whenever we have the opportunity. So this myth of exercise more and eat less, leading to improved health. Instead, we want to talk about how restriction and overfunctioning always backfires. And that's not just about bodies, that's in general. We, instead of the myth that body size or BMI equals health, we want the reality that health is determined by genetics, finances, food security. Instead of the myth of PE class motivates all kids equally or health class motivates all kids equally, this reality that weight stigma is really well documented and that different kids need different things. So again, this myth of one approach works for everybody. Some students with autism, diseases like cerebral palsy, ADHD, food insecurity, they might need individualized, kind of inclusive approaches to movement and to health education. All right, so that was kind of the overarching principles that we want to teach our kids, but what does body neutral, weight inclusive, and person inclusive care really look like day to day? First, it looks like making some core shifts for we health professionals and for you school health professionals. So you don't have to overhaul everything, just four fundamentals. So first, move from weight-centric health messaging to behavior-centered, body-inclusive health messaging. So you're looking at like what are all of the factors that make it so that someone is in a good state of health. Try to move from moralizing food to teaching food literacy with neutrality. Food literacy is what are the different nutrients that a certain food can provide. So instead of this idea of like all foods are equal, instead, no food is bad, but some foods have a higher nutrient density to them. So a Skittle is different than an avocado. It just is, right? So what does the avocado do for the body? And what does a Skittle do for the body? If the thing that we're teaching kids is the Skittle tastes really amazing and it helps us have fun when we're at the movies, that's great, right? The avocado is going to be the food that's going to help us in terms of having all those really good fatty acids. It might be helping us in terms of our hair looking shiny. So each food just does something different. We want to move from appearance-based praise and feedback to function, effort, and feeling-based affirmations. And then we want to move from ignoring or dismissing body-based bullying to being active and really having specific interventions. Okay, so that's number one. So just changing kind of the core ways that we look at our teaching or our interactions with kids. The second thing that we want to do is change the language from language that harms to language that is really healing for kids. So you guys can see kind of the list here. Few examples, you look great, have you lost weight, or obesity is a major health crisis, to health is shaped by sleep, movement, stress, and nutrition, not size. Instead of healthy bodies look like, healthy bodies feel strong, rested, cared for. I put here some scripts for difficult situations, and we can absolutely send these out to you guys. You can send all the slides so that way you have these as a point of reference. It just has a few items here about students commenting on another's weight, a parent asking you to monitor their kids' eating, other students commenting about other kids' eating practices, or colleagues. This other thing that you can do that's super important is to advocate for body inclusive school policies and for policies that actually change the culture at your school. So that includes the health curriculum, PE and athletics, what you're doing there, the school environment, so what posters look like, if the cafeteria moralizes food choices, staff culture, so body neutral training to professional development like you're doing right now, and supporting colleagues and updating their practice with grace. I'm going to help you guys in a minute to focus on the health curriculum part. And then working with families across the divide. So just like we were raised in the 80s and 90s, the parents of the kids that you're seeing, they were raised in that time period too, right? So a lot of well-meaning parents are going to reinforce harm. And so you have the opportunity as someone who now knows better after seeing this presentation, as hopefully knows better after reading the book that you're going to get, to be able to respond with care and clarity to those patients. In my One of a Kind Body, the book for kids, I actually put a section in the back that says what kids ask me and how I respond. And the secret to that is that those are actually little scripts that we can share with parents. So it's actually like if a kid said this to their parent, how could the parent respond? So it's good for health professionals like me, like some of you, like educators to be able to respond, but it's also a helpful book to kind of sneakily give to this generation of parents that's still learning how to respond. And what I find is, like myself, probably like many of you, there are people who don't want it to be diet culture for their kids. They want it to be different, but they're so nervous that they're going to get it wrong that then they end up kind of flubbing the whole thing or they just avoid the subject altogether. This is not going to be a script. These scripts in the book and also here that you will 100% say verbatim. But I have found that the more that I have something just in the back of my head, kind of memorized, or at least the gist of it, then when that moment comes with a parent or with a student, then I'm prepared and I can make it my own. And then finally, I wanted to put just some warning signs and next steps. I can't be a pediatrician and body confidence expert without talking about eating disorders and kids who actually need to really have assistance. So if kids are making some occasional negative comments about their body, they're avoiding PE or kind of communal eating spaces, comparing themselves to others frequently, this is a moment to build connection, to use some neutral language with them, encourage conversation with a trusted adult. When a kid is starting to have regular avoidance of meals or eating in front of others, you're seeing that kid in the cafeteria who does not eat their lunch. They're having changes in their energy, mood, social withdrawal. Seems like they're having some preoccupation with food rules or body checking. That is a moment to loop in a school counselor. If you are the school counselor, that is a moment to notify the parents and really document those observations so they can be shared with health professionals if the family is able to sign a release of information. And then you want to act now. I always want to act now. You want to act now if there's visible weight loss, if you suspect that there are signs of restriction or purging, if a kid is having any type of physical signs like fainting, dizziness, or other physical symptoms, or of course, if they've disclosed that they have disordered eating behaviors. That is involve the counselor and health team immediately and follow your school's health eating disorder protocol. If you don't have an eating disorder protocol, really important to have one. Most pediatrician offices have one that they can even share with schools, and so are happy to coordinate with you. Okay, so before I move into the book and the curriculum, I just wanted us to have a little moment to have some reflection and commitments about anything that you would carry forward from today in your classroom, your conversations, your own relationships with your bodies. Thinking about these, what's one significant diet culture message you absorbed growing up, where it came from? Thinking about maybe a specific student you work with in ways that your language or your practice might have reflected diet culture, even if you didn't mean to. What's one change you could be motivated to make, and what support would you need to do that? And then a moment when you've seen someone else harm a student and what you wish you'd done differently, or what after this presentation you realize, oh, I could make a difference. We can have people come off mute if you want. You can also write information in the chat if anyone feels willing to share. So I'm just going to pause for a second.
And I'll add that if you want to come off mute, you can use the raise hand feature, and then I will grant you access to do so.
We won't wait too long. I know that it can be kind of scary in a big group when you maybe don't know everybody else. Even if you don't share here, just think about it for yourself because I know, even in my own family, in this position, that there are times during the week, even that I think like, ooh, I could have done that differently with my two daughters. I have a 9-year-old and I have a 12-year-old. And especially as they came to that age of 8, where I first had kind of my own reckoning with my body, it became very much like, ooh, like I can see that there's some transference here that I am starting to look at them almost the way that I would look at like my younger self. And so, especially for those of you who are teaching or interacting with students that are at that kind of tender age, there's absolutely a lot that comes up. All right, I'm going to move on, but if anybody wants to raise their hand and share, just raise your hand and then Caitlin can unmute you, okay? All right. The other thing I would love, and if you want to take a screenshot of this so you can have it for yourself for later, is just to make a commitment to your students about what you want to stop doing or saying, what you want to start doing or saying with your students, and one student that you want to keep in mind as you make this change. And then one person that you want to tell about today's learning, because we're here, you get the opportunity because of ASHA and the American Academy of Pediatrics to be here and to learn and to realize, like, whoa, how impactful everything was as we were growing up. But there's plenty of people who don't realize just how insidious diet culture was and how it impacts the kids that they are dealing with today. All right, 6 things I want you to take with you. Number 1, you are not the villain. You are marinated in diet culture, and recognizing it is absolutely the first step in us doing better for our kids. Number 2, language matters so much. So the words that we use about our food, bodies, and movement teaches students who they're allowed to be. So that would be the other thing I would say is just watch yourselves when you're even in like the halls and you're in the lunchrooms. Remembering that weight is not health, that body literacy is way more important than body size. Remember that food neutrality protects kids. No food is morally good or bad, but some foods do have higher nutrient density. And that body-based bullying is your responsibility, really. We're teaching our kids not to body bully each other, but it's up to us as adults to catch it and to create norms that protect every kid from judgment so that they don't miss out on school and so that they don't have lifelong body stigma. And then finally, that you have the power to break the cycle, either personally and I hope professionally as well. Okay, so bringing it to the students because it's nice to talk about big concepts. It's nice to talk about language that matters or like specific situations, but you guys are all overwhelmed. There's tons of students that have a lot of needs. How are you supposed to integrate this into your daily lives and with your students? There's too much to do already. So we have developed a curriculum based off of my one-of-a-kind body that we are giving ASHA members for free for you to share with your students. So this is the book on the left-hand side, and I'm going to introduce you to some of the characters. Basically, what we did is we created animated video episodes of each of the chapters in the book. Some of them are me as a talking head, with me actually not as a cartoon, but as myself, in front of like a cartoon background. And then part of it is the characters actually interacting with each other and having like the storyline from the book. And then we also created some student worksheets and an actual curriculum plan that's very cut and paste for you. It's like show part of this episode, ask a question to your kids. Okay, now you're going to read a section of this book. Okay, now ask this question of your kids. Very simple, very easy. There's a number of different sessions that you can do within the curriculum. They could be done if you wanted to back to back to back every single day for a week. They could be done once a week for 7 weeks. So it's not prescriptive. It would be exactly what it is that you want to do, but we laid it out for you so that it's easy, easy peasy. Um, my one of a kind body talks about body literacy to kids. So it actually does the teaching for you about what their brains do, how movement supports the heart, brain, muscles, immune system, and sleep. So it's going to do that work for you. It talks about feelings first, individualized movement, and about the nutrition piece of it for you. I would say most importantly, it gives kids real choice in how they move. It gives buy-in for kids. There's lots of activities within the book that kids can do for themselves to choose what type of movement they want to do, what type of foods they want to explore, but then also to think about for themselves with mental health, how they feel about their body, how they can help a friend. And it teaches them all about body bullying. Chapter 1 through 2 is meet the characters. Then it goes through my amazing body. There's some puberty changes that it talks about. Just a call out here. It does not go into like sex ed. This is not a sex ed book. So you can feel reassured that it's not going to take like extra approval to get that part in here. It's very, very light on the puberty, more like this is what the body parts are and this is how they change as kids grow. There's a whole section on taking care of my body, then a chapter on body types and body bullying, fueling your body, moving your body, and then an entire chapter on what you watch. So, social media, beauty filters, how to protect self-worth, a mental health chapter, and then at the end, how to love my body and those questions that come up for kids. And it's story driven. Couple characters I just wanted to highlight. Greta is a 10-year-old kiddo with autism and anxiety. She loves art, Lego, baking. She's not into sports, so she's not like your typical, club sport kid, but she loves music. She teaches us that movement doesn't have to look like traditional PE. Sensory friendly options are not accommodations, they're just good design for these kids, and talks a lot about how music and rhythm can be helpful. And then another kiddo that's highlighted is Natalia, 11-year-old child who has cerebral palsy and uses a wheelchair. And they're actually told by another student to put some meat on those bones. So not just highlighting like the bigger bodied kids. So there are definitely those kids in this book that we talk about getting body bullied and about maybe when those kids need to have referrals, but also talks about kind of the skinny, sticks and bones kid who might also get body bullied for those reasons. So this is the full list of characters. Greta, Juan, who loves football, Natalia, Haley, who's a gymnast. She is a kiddo who's pushed too hard in her family. Her dad has an eating disorder. And then Troy, who's my favorite little guy. He's a clarinet player, Southern cooking enthusiast. He has a cat named Fitzgerald. And these kids all meet at camp over the summer. They have a really body confidence, inspiring kind of experience. And then they go back to their individual homes all across the United States. The thing that I am the most proud about with this book is that as I've given it to medical professionals and to health administrators across the country at conferences, that so many people have come up and just based off the cover have said like, oh my gosh, I've never seen a health book that has a child that looks like mine. I've never seen someone with different colored skin. I've never seen someone who is in a bigger body and it's talking about health. And so my hope is really that kids see themselves no matter who they are in this book and that you can help them to see themselves as healthy as well. Yeah, so this is how you would use my one of a kind body in your classroom section for health and PE teachers. So talking about a joyful movement unit, classroom teachers, reading aloud, school counselors, so using with individual students, and then for health professionals, recommending to families as well. And of course, you guys can use it, in whatever way fits you. But we also have the curriculum that's set for you, so that way you wouldn't have to do any specific learning there. Okay, let me stop sharing. Okay, awesome. Okay, I have to exit. Uh-oh. Okay, hold on. Am I there? Okay.
Yeah, we can see you.
Yay. Okay, wonderful. So yeah, that's the presentation. I hope you guys learned something. I know that Elise and the ASHA team are going to talk a little bit more about the offering that we have for you all, but I just wanted to say before that, you have my Instagram and we'll send out the slides. I think they are making this available for replay. That was a question that looks like it popped up in the chat.
We would love it to be that's available for people. We'll send out the slides so you guys can share it with your coworkers as well, your colleagues, and with families as well. Oh, and I was going to say, if anyone has questions or wants to email me directly with questions about things that have come up with students or about like presentations at their school, that type of thing, I can have the ASHA people share my email, direct email. I've done school presentations directly and presentations at different medical practices too. Guys.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Casares. That's wonderful. There are a couple of questions in the chat that if we have a couple of minutes to get to those. One of which is, do you happen to have a school engagement letter or an approach overview that would help them with school adoption? And maybe Jenny could give a little more input on what would be most helpful in that kind of letter, um, to kind of encourage adoption of this curriculum and book.
Yeah, absolutely. Jenny, if you're willing to come off mute and let us know what would be helpful, it's easy to create that type of thing. We don't have anything created right now, but we can whip it up for you in a couple days and get it over to you.
Yeah, terrific.
Hello, thank you
Hi.
for answering my question. I just think that what we have is a significant amount of burnout and overwhelm at schools already with unfunded mandates, expectations, dwindling budgets, schools shutting down. I mean, the realities are that like schools aren't really taking on anything more. So, and we just like in one of our districts, we lost like 50 health teachers because of budget cuts. So to me, it's like, is this financially feasible? Would we have to pay teachers to implement it? Not you, but I mean, like we would have to figure out funding to help support some of this work because right now health is being deprioritized. Um,
Sure.
at the national level, even with the changes with Department of Education.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious if there are like some data points about like, or if this has been studied, has it been piloted? Do you see changes in behavior or health outcomes or kids that are experiencing chronic disease? Is there a reduction in expectations or services needed for school health nurses? Like, are there ways that we can kind of prove that this approach is really helpful? All the while, school nutrition is also problematic with what's being offered in our cafeterias to children. So, like, how do we balance all that, but then also encourage schools to buy into new language, especially when we're talking about, body neutrality and building autonomy, um, and building health literacy when it's being deprioritized. So I'll get off
Yeah,
my
great question. Yeah, no, that's a great question. Okay, so actually, so to clarify on this piece of it, the curriculum is free, the videos are free. It would really be a matter of like one book being purchased per probably teacher, right? So that way they could have it available for the kids to pass around. So that part, not cost prohibitive. The second part, though, about adoption and about teachers and about research. So we are actually partnering with an organization called Be Real that actually has middle school and high school curriculum that is completely aligned with this curriculum and already distributes this type of curriculum to those organizations. And they actually already have the studies that are on this exact type of framework in those populations. So we absolutely have data behind this that this is helpful and the way to go. And they are going to be distributing it and also sending out to school administrators. So if anyone is interested specifically in being connected to them to get this to your school administration, that would be the route to go. And you can email me and I can connect you to them. It's going to be on their portal and in their system here in the next like month. So that would be a way, hopefully, to influence school administration and make it so that you could prove the point with the data.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Um, Heather asked, does anyone have a set of examples for how food literate language has been used to update state level academic standards in health education? And I think that is uh, a wonderful question. I want to just point out the health education standards that ASHA collaborated on. I've put the link in the chat. One of the standards relates to um, students demonstrating effective interpersonal communication skills. And that really struck me as something that might be very helpful in this conversation is not only us modeling that that messaging like you provided to us, Dr. Casares, but then that translates to better communication to a student's peers. And so I would encourage you to take a look at those standards and think about that. And you had mentioned in the book that there was a piece around how to respond. Could you talk a little bit more about, you said things that the questions that students have had for you and how you responded?
Oh yeah, so there's a whole section in the book. I don't have it in here. There's a whole section in the book in the very back that says when students ask me these questions, this is how, or when patients ask me these questions, this is how I respond. So for example, it says like if a kid asks like, "Am I fat?" Then I put back, this is how I would respond. And then I put like the two sentences or the three sentences of what I would say back. If a student asks me, "Is junk food really bad for me?" Then I put the three sentences of how I would respond. And I saw a couple comments in here like junk food is bad. We need to teach them that it's bad for their teeth. 100%. Like we do need to teach kids about the things that can be really helpful to our bodies in certain foods and the things that can be really harmful in our bodies. I think the difference between like calling foods bad or calling foods good is that psychologically for kids, unfortunately, when we call foods bad all the time, it makes it so that then those kids want those foods even more. So we have to find a way with kids to kind of thread the needle to talk about this is a food that's like a sometime food or a food that like, yes, it has this benefit, but it also has this risk if you have too much of it. So that's how I think about it.
Yes, Caitlin wants to eat her Taco Bell when she feels sad.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Caceres. This has been so helpful for all of us. And I want to thank AAP for your partnership as well, and just invite you all to take a look at the e-learning that we will have posted in our learning management system. You can access that through ashaweb.org. And Caitlin, can you tell us a little bit more about how we can get there and how we can get the discount for ASHA members? And what if we want to become a member?
Yeah, so for those that already are ASHA members, all you need to do is log into the member portal, go to member discounts page, and you will see at the bottom of the page, there's a section for My One of a Kind Body, and it will tell you how to access that discount code, apply the discount code, get your book, and take the e-learning course as well. And then Elise had told me that if anyone is interested in doing bulk purchases of the book rather than individual purchases, that she would be more than happy to assist with that. So Jeannie, I saw put in the chat how to access that discount. But after this webinar, I will be sure to send an email out to everyone with information on how to access the e-learning course, where to get the book. I know Dr. Casares said she would share her slides. I will also be posting the recording somewhere. So all of that wonderful information will be going out in an email, so stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, if any questions come up before then, you can always email us at info@ashaweb.org, and we'd be happy to answer your questions. Elise, is there anything you want to add?
Just a great big thank you to Dr. Casares and ASHA and to all of you for participating today.
Great.
Yes, I
Thank you so
agree.
much.
Thank you.
Everyone
All
have
right.
a great day.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
all. Bye.
Bye.